and I will do it to the best of my ability, without fear or favour, to coin a phrase, come what may, do or die. The Leader of the House.
I'm grateful, as always, Mr. Speaker, for your contribution to the debate, and it is always very useful that your words should be referred to and reminded to the House, where it was suggested by you that this matter should be referred to the Procedure Committee and the motion amended, which it hasn't been. There is so much to say and so little time, others will want to speak. This motion, in a number of ways, is extraordinary. I will, of course, give way to the Honourable Learned Lady.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I wonder if I might go back to the matter raised by the Right Honourable Learned Member for Beaconsfield. It was revealed in court this morning in a case raised in my name and that of 70 other members of this House that on the 16th of August, the Prime Minister agreed to a suggestion that Parliament should be prorogued on the 9th of September. But on the 25th of August, a Number 10 spokesperson said the claim that the Government is considering proroguing Parliament in September in order to stop MPs debating Brexit is entirely false. Does the Right Honourable Gentleman accept that the spokesperson misled MPs and the public on the 25th of August?
Well, I'm sorry to say, Mr. Speaker, that the most obvious understanding of the ordinary use of the English language, which normally the Honourable Lady is pretty good at, makes it quite clear that the two statements are entirely compatible. The prorogation is the normal prorogation to have a new session. It is not to stop debate on matters related to the European Union. And it is, of course, a pleasure to give way to the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Nahilling and Anyar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. The Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman spoke earlier about candour, and the need for candour means that he has to accept that when it comes to WTO, all countries bar about 3 in the world are in regional trade associations. And the 3 that aren't are roughly South Sudan, Somalia and East Timor, probably soon joined, if a hard Brexit comes, by the UK. But given that these countries, every other bar 3, are in regional trade associations, that means they don't exclusively trade at WTO. So the place that he talks about, when he talks about WTO, he's taking the UK to a place of exclusively trading on WTO, which is moving out of free trade with 500 million people to make trade more expensive with 500 million people. That's his policy. Now, the other question, did you know about Prorogation on the 16th of August?
16th of August, I was at Lord's watching a game of cricket, unless it was one of the days when it rained. But on the WTO issue, our trade with the United States on WTO terms, and I know the Honourable Gentleman is an expert in these matters, has grown faster since the creation of the single market than our trade with the European Union. But I understand my right honourable friend wishes to intervene.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. I understand his views and his concerns about the supposed constitutional irregularity of these proceedings, and no doubt in the future all these things can be debated. Will he accept that we stand as a nation at present at a moment which will have a profound effect on the welfare of our people, and that the sovereign parliament of this country clearly deserves an opportunity to be able to decide whether it will accept a policy of no-deal exit or not, and that overwhelmingly matters more than whether the Standing Order 24B clause with where in it, misdrafted in all probability by the then Leader of the House, has a particular meaning or does not have a particular meaning.
There is, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to say, stunning arrogance to that view. And it fails to understand where sovereignty comes from. So I do indeed dare to say this, and I say that to the Right Honourable Gentleman, because...
Order. I recognise that there are strongly held views on both sides of the House on all aspects of this matter, but the Leader of the House must be heard. The Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sovereignty in this House comes from the British people, and the idea that we can overrule 17.4 million people is preposterous, and the idea that our rules do not exist to protect the people from arrogant power grabs is mistaken. Those rules are there for the protection of the people. I have given way so many times and to many distinguished members, and it is now time to come on to this motion which is extraordinary and unprecedented. Parliament is attempting to set aside Standing Order number 14 to give precedence to the EU Withdrawal number 6 bill. This motion goes further and seeks to claim an unknown and unquantified number of subsequent days for consideration of Lord's amendments and messages. It is a fundamental principle that government is able to transact its business in this House, a principle this House has long accepted in Standing Order number 14. This motion also sets aside in a new parliamentary session the standing orders that apply in relation to the presentation of private members' bills. The motion would allow a designated member, few of the Illuminati who are taking the powers to themselves, to give notice of presentation of this bill on the first day of the new session and then provide time for debate on this bill on the second day of the new session, interrupting the Queen's speech. There is an established process for the House debating the Queen's speech, a process that this bill would undermine. While the Outlaws Bill has its first reading just before the start of the Queen's speech debate, this bill is only read a first time as a formality and not debated. To interrupt the Queen's speech to debate a backbench bill such as the one proposed in this motion would be unprecedented. The government has an obligation to bring forward its business, and the Queen's speech and the debate that follows is one of the great set pieces of the parliamentary calendar where the government is rightly scrutinised and held to account, and this is being interrupted. And I give way to the very patient honourable gentleman.
It's the right honourable gentleman for giving way, but I want to take him back to a point made by the honourable gentleman from Wellingborough. The right honourable gentleman said quite a lot as a Brexiteer that we would be taking back control of our laws, so can he be crystal clear at the dispatch box tonight that if the bill passes in this House and passes another way, the government will not stop that getting royal assent if we're taking back control of our laws?
The law will be followed. This country is a country that follows the rule of law, and this government assiduously follows constitutional conventions, unlike some other members of this House. But I understand the honourable gentleman from Stone wishes to intervene.
In what could only be described as a breathtaking intervention by the member for West Dorset just now, and in support of my right honourable friend's assertion that it was weighed with great arrogance, would my right honourable friend be good enough to confirm that, in fact, the referendum bill, as enacted, was a sovereign act of Parliament which deliberately gave the right to the British people and not to the British Parliament to make the decision on the question of remain or leave?
The honourable gentleman is, of course, right, and we report to the British people anyway. They are our bosses, and the honourable lady has been so patient.
I'd like to thank him for giving way. Back to the bigger picture. The Prime Minister made it very clear in his speech last night and in a statement today that his preferred outcome is to leave with a deal. Can the Leader of the House confirm that that is also his preferred outcome, and that if a deal is agreed at the next European Council, sufficient time will be made in this chamber to make sure that we've legislated for that deal?
The honourable lady is absolutely right, and I can say both personally and as bound by collective responsibility that I am in favour of a deal. We must allow other people to speak. I see that timed winged chariot is speeding away, and therefore I must get on to the separation of powers. Well, if the honourable gentleman wants me to carry on all night, I'll do my best. But the debate we are having today goes to the heart of our Constitution and the roles of the Executive and Parliament. These are matters of careful balance. It is for government, by virtue of its ability to command the confidence of this House, to exercise executive power. This includes the order of business and bringing forward legislation. It is for Parliament to scrutinise, to amend, to reject or to approve. Indeed, the scrutiny of the executive is one of the core functions of Parliament. These complementary and distinctive roles are essential to the functioning of the Constitution. Ministers are, of course, accountable to Parliament for their decisions and actions, and Parliament can make clear its views. It is not, however, for Parliament to undertake the role and functions of the executive. Constitutional convention is that executive power is exercised by Her Majesty's government, which has a democratic mandate to govern. That mandate is derived from the British people and represented through this House. And, Mr. Speaker, when we look at this Constitution, we are protected by our rules and by our orders and by our conventions. We will remember from a man from all seasons that it is those rules, those laws, those conventions that protect us from the winds of tyranny. And if we take away those protections, as the Right Honourable Gentleman proposes, we lose our protections. And it is therefore on the basis of this convention that the government, not Parliament, is responsible for the negotiations with the European Union. Parliament as a whole cannot negotiate for the UK. This is the role of the government in exercising executive power to give effect to the will of the nation. These roles are fundamental and underpin the country's uncodified constitution. The government draws power from Parliament. The government draws power from Parliament, but the government may at any time be removed by the tried and tested motion of a confidence debate. And the fact that Parliament has not been willing to go down this route, the fact that the opposition are afraid of this route, the fact that the opposition run away from the confidence vote route is because they do not dare have the leader of the opposition at head of the government. They are frightened. The Honourable Lady says there is time. Let me say as Leader of the House that if they want a motion of confidence, this government will always make time for it and obey the Constitutional Convention. But they are afraid. They are white with fear because they don't want the Right Honourable Gentleman to be in 10 Downing Street. And I will now give way to my honourable friend.
I am very grateful to my right honourable friend. Will he agree with me that if this House succeeds in stripping our Prime Minister of the key negotiating card of a no deal, the likelihood of that outcome will be that much accentuated?
Thank you. Yes, it makes the negotiations much harder. My honourable friend is right, absolutely right. But now let us turn to the substance of what we are debating. Ostensibly, the purpose of the bill is to stop no deal. But the government wants a deal. We are willing to sit down with the Commission and EU member states to talk about what needs to be done and to achieve a deal. This must involve the excision of the anti-democratic backstop. The government has also been clear that we must respect the referendum result, and the UK will be leaving the EU on the 31st of October, whatever the circumstances, unless and until the EU agrees to negotiate. We will be leaving with no deal on the 31st of October. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has made a statement earlier today in which he informed the House of all that is being done to ensure we are ready for all eventualities. The good Boy Scouts that we are prepared, and I will definitely give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Does he not realise that in proroguing Parliament for 5 weeks, which is the longest prorogation right in the middle of a political crisis that there has been since 1945, his government and he have deliberately prevented scrutiny that would be legitimate in this House, hence the situation we find ourselves in now? And will he, when he gets back up at that dispatch box, confirm that if this bill is passed through this House and passes the other place, he will speed the royal assent and his government will not act against the law?
I don't wish to be pedantic, Mr. Speaker, but it's one of the constitutional niceties that it's Her Majesty's government, it's not mine, and it is led by my right honourable friend, the member for Uxbridge. But the important issue here is that prorogation is a routine start for a new session. We are losing a similar number of days that we would lose for a normal prorogation. I will give way to the... I'm afraid the Honourable Lady, I will give way to her, but she is trumped momentarily by the chairman of the Brexit Select Committee.
Extremely grateful to the Leader of the House for giving way. Now that the Speaker has made it clear that there is nothing irregular at all about his acceptance of this motion, and given that I presume the Leader of the House accepts that the House is in charge of its own procedures, how can there be anything constitutionally irregular if the House chooses to pass this motion and then the bill tomorrow, in the House choosing to instruct the government that there is an outcome to the Brexit negotiations that the House is not prepared to accept, which is leaving without a deal on the 31st of October?
The honourable gentleman conflates irregular and proper. This is unquestionably irregular, even though it is not improper. And the two are different concepts, which the right honourable gentleman, I'm sure, fully understands. It is, of course, for this House to regulate its own proceedings, but a fundamental principle of our Constitution is that the government commands the confidence of this House. If this from a sedentary position, an honourable gentleman says it doesn't. Now that is the lock that would undo this constitutional conundrum, because the House dare not say it has no confidence in the government. It is frightened of that, and therefore it tries to take away confidence on specifics whilst maintaining confidence in the generality. That is not a proper constitutional position to be in. And it's very difficult to choose who to give way to, but I promise the Honourable Lady.
He has referred many times in his speech to the accountability, and within that vein of accountability, can I ask him a simple question? On what date did he become aware of the Prime Minister's intention to prorogue Parliament?
Yes, I've been asked that question, and I understand there are papers in court, and I don't know when I was told that this was happening, though I had to get a flight. I had to get a flight up to Aberdeen for a meeting of the Privy Council, but without consulting my diary and my telephone records, I would not wish to say something that was inaccurate. But let us get back to what is happening here. I was saying that we are the good Boy Scouts. We are well prepared for leaving with or without a deal, and it is absurd for MPs to attempt to bind the hands of the Prime Minister as he seeks to agree a deal they can support ahead of the European Council. The European Union withdrawal bill makes it harder to deliver the two things the public wants from Brexit. Certainty is one of them, and for it to be delivered. The bill does not do this. It is nothing but legislative legerdemain and a vehicle for extension after extension. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady, who's been very patient.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. My constituents in Sleaford and North Hykeham voted overwhelmingly to leave and are very concerned about the bill proposed for tomorrow that they can see would block Brexit. Could my right honourable friend confirm my understanding that if this bill were to pass, the options available would be to the EU, and they would be to, one, agree a largely pointless 3-month extension, which would almost certainly be repeated, 2, offer a deal of their choice, not negotiated by our government, or no deal. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that that is not taking back control for this Parliament or for this government, but ceding it entirely to Brussels?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because what is happening is a deliberate attempt to sow the seed for an extension long enough for a second referendum, or simply to stop us leaving at all. It is about denying Brexit, and the fact that the bill mandates updates on negotiations and motions on those updates on a rolling 28-day basis clearly envisages either a lengthy extension or possibly indefinite vassalage. And these seeds could grow into legislation to be introduced on the 15th of January, the 12th of February, and then every 28 days thereafter to command the government to take specific actions. The aim is to create a marionette government in which there is only nominal confidence, and it defies the convention in what we are doing today, a convention of great importance, that emergency legislation is only passed when there is a consensus. Governments less benign than this one in future may learn from this process and ram through any legislation they feel like. Without consensus, emergency legislation is something those on the opposition benches should be very careful about, for they may find they are at the wrong end of it in future. And we should be trying to help the Prime Minister in his chance to negotiate, not trying to bind him hand and foot. Not only do we want to be the vassal state of the European Union, we wish to send the Prime Minister bound hand and foot to go and negotiate with them. Mr. Speaker, you will be glad to know, Mr. Speaker, that I am drawing gently to a close, and therefore I fear the time for interventions, except from my very old friend, the Honourable Lady, Right Honourable Lady, the Chairman of the very distinguished committee that she's Chairman of.
Send him a note.
Mr. Speaker, for once the Right Honourable Gentleman has made an error and he's over-promoted me, but I thank him for his distinctive comments. There's a serious point here. We are a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. And I take that judgment seriously, as I know do colleagues across the House. The government does not have a majority. We are in uncharted constitutional territory. So it is absolutely right and proper that we exercise our judgment in the interests of the country to avoid, at the very least, a no-deal Brexit. So for all of the talk from the Honourable Member, Right Honourable Member, we must exercise that judgment. That is what we're doing. It is entirely responsible.
I'm afraid I disagree with the Honourable Lady, and I must confess I'm astonished that she's not a Right Honourable. Something must have gone wrong with the Privy Council, of which I'm now Lord President. It is not to be the case. Honourable Member from Rhondda feels he has also not been justly promoted. I am sorry.
But I don't think the Leader of the House was planning to invite the Honourable Lady to join him in Balmoral, as far as I'm aware. So I'm not sure it makes a great deal of difference in the immediate circumstance. The Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I'm afraid the Honourable Lady is wrong, because there is a routine constitutional procedure to deal with that, and that is the vote of confidence. And yes, we are a representative body, but where does our sovereignty come from? And here I'm in agreement with the Scots. Sovereignty comes from the people to Parliament. We hold it in trust for them, and they gave us an instruction. And if we follow this route, we are left with but three options. We then have to accept the deal with its anti-democratic backstop. We have to keep on extending, because Parliament would never accept that we are ready to leave, or we could simply revoke and tell 17.4 million people that they were wrong. The approach taken today is the most unconstitutional use of this House since the days of Charles Stuart Parnell, when he tried to bung up Parliament. Usurping the executive's right is unconstitutional. The abuse of emergency debates to do so is unconstitutional, and the bill itself is yet more unconstitutional. A.V. Dicey said all conventions have one ultimate object: to secure that Parliament or the Cabinet shall in the long run give effect to the will of the people. These conventions are being disregarded today, and so by extension is the will of the nation. Parliament sets itself against the people. Sovereignty comes from the people to Parliament. It does not come to Parliament out of a void. If Parliament tries to challenge the people, this stretches the elastic of our Constitution near to breaking point. We should recognise that the people are our masters and show us to be their lieges and servants, not to place ourselves in the position of their overlords. As we come to vote today, I hope all members, Mr. Speaker, will contemplate the current constitutional confusion and consider the chaos this concatenation of circumstances could create.